Good evening. Welcome to the broadcast. Glad you are with us. I am going to talk to you tonight about the incredible threat facing America. Folks, I just cannot stress enough how seriously you need to be taking the current state of our nation. I'm going to play some video clips from my friend, the late Dr. Peter Vincent Pry, who was a CIA analyst and was the premier voice on warning about China and Russia, EMP, and their nuclear ability, their hypersonic missiles, the Satan II, and so much more. I'm also going to play for you tonight some very important video clips that could save the life, well, not only of yourself, but save the life of your children and your grandchildren. What do you think the first thing most adults and children would do if there was a large explosion and you are surrounded by light because of a nuclear attack? What would be the first thing most adults and certainly most children would do if they saw a huge flash? Didn't hear any noise because the noise hasn't arrived yet, but saw a huge flash. What would they do? Many would run to the window to see why are we surrounded by light? What's this big flash? And what would happen? Well, depending on where they were in the blast area, you'd be looking at a 300-mile-an-hour tornado. It would last 3 seconds coming right at you, and that glass window would be glass bullets that would shred them apart. I'm quoting to you really from some doctors, medical doctors, physicians who are experts on how to respond to a nuclear blast. I'm going to play some very important clips. I played some of these clips on my radio show probably about a year ago. I'm going to play them for television tonight. You know that our government now is supposedly ordering up millions of dollars worth of medicines for, well, people who are sick from a nuclear fallout. Our government knows far more than they're telling us, and in many cases, our government is in cahoots. Don't forget, there are many people that believe our government was very aware that 9/11 was going to happen, and maybe was more involved than we have been told. There's also many experts that know that there were those who knew that Japan was going to carry out the bombing of Pearl Harbor, but they needed that in order to get Americans to go along with, well, involvement in the war. We can't trust our government anymore. Enemies, foreign and domestic, have penetrated our government. They don't care about you. They're not interested in your life. In fact, the very same government is doing their very best to murder as many of us as they can, as evident from the COVID outbreak, which apparently our own DOD and CIA was behind, certainly practicing for it. They certainly seem to know about it, funding the labs for it, and certainly behind the bioweapon shot, the clot shot. So trust me, they know what's coming, and I've gotten reports from people that own companies that build bunkers. And very, very, very wealthy people, and a couple of them extremely high-profile people over the last few years, have been building very, very expensive bunkers. Do you need a bunker to survive a nuclear blast? Most Americans think that if a nuclear blast occurs in America, it's over. There's no way you're going to survive. That's not true. There's only a certain percentage that will die based on if they're inside the blast radius, and then those that are in the path of the fallout. Which way's the wind blowing? What's the weather pattern? So if you think, well, it doesn't matter because I'm not going to survive a nuclear blast or fallout, think again. In fact, you're going to hear tonight one physician talking about the number of preppers that he comes in contact with. And how many of the preppers have prepared for everything, but they don't even bother to prepare for nuclear war or nuclear fallout because they have been led to believe that it can't be survived, so there's nothing to prepare for. The answer is you can survive, and many of you would be alive after a nuclear attack on America. So, how can you survive? How can you save the life of your children and grandchildren? You're going to hear some very, very important information tonight. If time allows, I want to open the phone lines for your feedback. Let me first do what I did today on radio, take you to this article. The other day I went to my own website, WVWTV.com, and I put in the search engine just one word, balloon. Because I thought, I wonder if I have talked about delivering an EMP through a balloon, just like China just sent across America. Sure enough, here's this article I found. This article is from 2018, February 1st, 2018. That's almost exactly 5 years ago. Understanding the threat to America's critical infrastructure from an EMP and cyber attack. This is actually a transcript. And in the transcript, I said, well, look at that. A physical attack on a power grid. So we have the ability of the sun doing damage through solar storms to our power grid, through what would be the equivalent of an EMP through solar flares. We have a hacking of a power grid by rogue states and even ISIS. We also have the ability of physical damage. And then finally, we have the issue of electromagnetic pulse bomb being detonated up over the United States or even lifted up over the United States of America with a balloon. Wait a minute. I'd forgotten I'd even said that. There are many things I have said and taught and presented. I can't remember them all because of the many thousands upon thousands of hours of television and radio I have done. But where did I learn this idea of a balloon? I learned it from Dr. Peter Vincent Pry. Look at this. By the way, there are 3 power grids in America. I talk about that. Then I go on to say many people believe what they're really testing is an H-bomb for the purpose of carrying out an EMP attack. Again, all they would need to do is put some kind of scud into our atmosphere above our country and detonate a nuclear weapon and let the electromagnetic pulse grab the curvature of the Earth and do the damage it would do. Or put it up with a balloon. Quoting an article about North Korea's H-bomb being a super EMP weapon. So here we are on our own website reporting the idea of delivering an EMP through a balloon. I had forgotten about reporting on that. I had to use my own search engine to find it. But I learned it from a man, as I said, Dr. Peter Vincent Pry. In fact, here's a Washington Examiner article just from the other day, last Friday. Dry run. Balloon called top delivery platform for nuclear EMP attack. Well, I would like to now share with you some video clips and audio clips of Dr. Peter Vincent Pry. As I said, he was the chief of staff of the EMP Congressional Commission and then the head of the EMP Task Force. Sadly, he passed away last August 2022. He was a dear friend of mine, set right here where I'm sitting right now for many hours as he hosted his TV show that we produced right here. I also produced his weekly radio show every Monday morning at 11 a.m. Central. I would call him and we would record his weekly broadcast. He was a lone voice, really, warning about much of what we are seeing today. Whether it's my friend, the late Dr. Jimmy D. Young, Dr. Ron Carlson, Dr. Peter Pry. There are so many that I'd like to pick up the phone and talk to based on what's happening in our country and our world. Dr. Pry is one I would love to talk to, well, pretty much on a daily basis right now and be getting his information. But thankfully, he was willing to be interviewed many times, wrote many, many, many books that are still available and more relevant now than the day he wrote them. You'll find them on Amazon. Just type in Dr. Peter Vincent Pry. And thankfully, we have these recordings. So let's start tonight, and then we'll get to the physicians that are explaining to us how to survive a nuclear attack. Your kids need to hear this, your grandkids, and you need to hear it, and you need to tell them if they don't hear it. Here's the first. This is from October 2021. October 2021. Listen to Dr. Peter Vincent Pry as I interviewed him. Very relevant for what's happening in America and the world right now.
Now, what China just demonstrated is far more significant than Sputnik was. I mean, it's a bona fide revolutionary space weapon, and you can imagine a lot of other things that this could do that would shift the balance of power. It could be used for not only EMP, but you could use hypersonic glide vehicles, to attack aircraft carrier groups and sink whole navies. They're traveling at supersonic speeds. You wouldn't even need a nuclear weapon or a conventional weapon on them. They could crash into a ship and sink it, or they could be used to deliver intelligent submunitions, to take out tank armies or to take out air bases across a whole theater of operations. And they can go anywhere in the world in 45 minutes or less. Wow. Imagine that. Wow. If you're fighting a war someplace in the Pacific or in Europe or in Asia, and your side is losing, all you have to do is push a button, and in 45 minutes or less, this super weapon is going to come to the rescue. Imagine intelligent air-to-air missiles, okay? Suppose that China is losing an air battle with American carriers over Taiwan. You could launch a bunch of these things and shift the balance by delivering, 100 air-to-air missiles to take out U.S. aircraft. I mean, that's the future that this signifies. Wow. This is more than a Sputnik moment, but half of Washington doesn't think so.
So bring me to what just now. That was last week's revelation.
Yes.
Now we're all right. I'm going to stop it there. So do you understand? These are missiles that are so capable and hypersonic, and their ability to deliver multiple payloads with one rocket. Now, I want to play another clip by Dr. Pry where he gets more into this, okay? Because, again, this is very crucial that we understand what it is he's talking about, because this is where we're living right now. This next interview with him was also from October 2021. October 2021. They were just about a week apart from each other. Here's Dr. Peter Pry again.
Now, what's interesting and unusual, what makes this a technological first, is that China has combined two kinds of super weapons. One of them, called the fractional orbital bombardment system, has been combined with a hypersonic warhead. And that's never been done before. This kind of a thing has never been done before. The fractional orbital bombardment system, or FOBS, is not new. We've never done it. We've never developed that technology, but the Soviet Union basically invented it during the Cold War. And it was designed to make a surprise EMP attack on the United States, a surprise nuclear EMP attack on the United States. The idea is that you put a nuclear warhead disguised as a satellite on a space launch vehicle, and then you launch it away from the United States on a southern trajectory. So it's flying away from the United States. And so we don't suspect we're being attacked because it's not an ICBM, it's a space launch vehicle. It's not a warhead, it looks like a satellite. Okay, it's a warhead disguised as a satellite, and it's flying away from the United States to the south. But you're using a booster that's so powerful that it puts the warhead into a southern orbit, and it passes over the southern hemisphere, passes over the South Pole basically, and comes up on the other side, orbiting on the other side, and approaches us from the south. And during the Cold War and today, the United States doesn't have any ballistic missile early warning radars looking south, and we don't have any missile interceptors protecting our southern flank. We're blind and defenseless from the south. And the Soviets were counting on that in the Cold War to launch a surprise attack. The idea is the satellite, when it reaches, passes over North America, at traveling at an altitude about 300 kilometers, it would detonate and create an electromagnetic pulse which would fry the electronics across North America, knock out command and control systems, fry the electronics in ICBMs and bombers and submarines in port, and basically paralyze us so that then they could launch, and that alone might be enough to win the nuclear war, but the Russians, as always, like to make the rubble bounce, and to be sure, would then launch their ICBMs across the North Pole. and do your standard kind of a nuclear attack where you would blow up the bomber bases, blow up ICBMs in their silos, destroy the submarine ports, and win a nuclear war in that way. That was the plan. So the fractional orbital bombardment system, the secret weapon, was developed by the Soviet Union during the Cold War, and was largely forgotten. Was largely forgotten by just about everybody except me. And that's just the truth. I was the first one who resurrected the idea or pointed out that when North Korea launched its first satellite, the KMS-3, back in 2012, December 2012, that this thing looked suspiciously like the fractional orbital bombardment system. They launched it on this southern trajectory. The satellite passed on its first orbit. It passed over the United States. And it's still orbiting over us. And the North Koreans put a second satellite. They did that a few years later, so that they've got two satellites that are passing over the United States on the optimum trajectory for doing an EMP attack if those satellites have got a warhead hidden in them. And it wasn't just my opinion, but the EMP Commission warned that those satellites might well be nuclear armed for an EMP attack. So the Soviets came up with a fractional orbital bombardment system. They probably gave the technology to North Korea, just because North Korea, by the way, has been getting help from Russia and China in its nuclear and missile programs. There's been a lot of technology transfers. That's why North Korea is so much more advanced than the intelligence community had anticipated, because they haven't been doing it on their own. They've been helped by Russia and China. The intelligence community still doesn't want to admit that. There are political reasons for that. They want to believe that we can solve the North Korean nuclear threat through China, but that doesn't work if you accept the idea that North Korea is a client state of China, and basically the Chinese have armed them, and the Russians have armed them with nuclear missiles and sophisticated secret weapons like this fractional orbital bombardment system and the satellites. Russia has been, Vladimir Putin personally, has been talking about Russia bringing back their fractional orbital bombardment system. They're working on an ICBM. They're going to soon start deploying a new ICBM called the Satan II. And this is the most powerful. It's called a heavy ICBM. We don't have anything like this. It's called a heavy ICBM because it's got such a tremendous throw weight. It can put something like 10 or 20 tons into orbit. And Putin has described this thing as being able to attack any target in the world on any trajectory, and they specifically have described it as being able to bypass U.S. national missile defenses by attacking us over the pole, just the way the Soviet Union had planned to do with the fractional orbital bombardment system making an EMP attack back during the Cold War. So the Russians have actually been advertising that they do this. They probably have the FOBS already deployed. They've got, on some other system, they've got a lot of space launch vehicles like the Proton, which can put into orbit tremendous amounts of weight, so they could put a huge warhead into orbit if they wanted to. We know the Russians have got a 100 megaton warhead, might even be 200 megatons. That is huge. I mean, that's more than 100 times more powerful than the most powerful U.S. warhead. 100 to 200 times the most powerful. I think the most powerful weapon the United States still has in its inventory is 1 megaton. So we're talking about 100 to 200 megatons.
Wow.
That's like 10,000 times more powerful than the Hiroshima or Nagasaki bomb. 10,000 times. And it would be a great weapon for an EMP attack. Talk about making the EMP rubble bounce. Not only would it be able to, and you don't need a weapon that powerful, by the way, to take down the U.S. electric grid or to fry U.S. The electronics in U.S. nuclear systems. But the benefit you would get from warhead of that yield is that it would also put out a lot of X-rays and gamma rays into space. So in addition to paralyzing North America, it would also take out the satellites at the same time with one warhead, potentially.
And why are those satellites so important to our nuclear triad? And maybe explain what that is to people.
Well, the nuclear triad is our land-based ICBMs, our bomber force, and our ballistic missile submarines. And these forces can't execute, none of them can execute unless they get emergency action messages. And our satellites from the president, those emergency action messages aren't just orders to go ahead and launch, but they include unlocking codes so that you can unlock the warheads, unlock the missiles so the missiles can be launched. You cannot launch the missiles unless you have those codes. The codes determine are not just safety precautions, but they also determine what kind of a strike option you're going to make. What targets do you want to hit? And that information, one of the ways of providing that information, especially to the ballistic missile submarine force that's at sea, is through our satellites. And the satellites are indispensable, the GPS satellites, to the accuracy of our cruise missiles and bombers and the ICBMs. In effect, if you take out the satellites, you're destroying the central nervous system of our military, our chief means of communicating orders and methods of guiding our missiles and bombers. It's what has given our space assets is what has enabled the United States to be so successful in our conventional wars as well. The huge advantages we have in all the Persian Gulf Wars.
All right, we're gonna hold it right there. So there's a lot there. Fractional orbital bombardment systems. You can go look it up. There's even a Wikipedia page on it, and you can read about it and learn about it. And he's saying that China has combined these two things together. The fractional orbital bombardment system with hypersonic warheads. He says this is for a surprise EMP attack. He says, looks like a satellite, but it's a warhead posing as a satellite in orbit. Comes to us from the south. We're blind. We don't have the defense systems we need from the south. And it could fry our ICBMs right in their silos, our intercontinental ballistic missiles, our bombers on the ground, and any subs in port. And those three things are what make up your nuclear triad. Believe me, I interviewing Colonel Mills again yesterday. What did I ask him? Were the Chinese with this satellite or with this balloon that it drifted from Canada to Montana across the U.S., being directed, not going by just as the wind blows, but was being navigated by the CCP all the way out to the East Coast? They were stopping along the way and monitoring our nuclear triads, our ICBMs, their silos, the places where the bombers are sitting that get up to send the signal to the subs to launch the nuclear missiles. And then the actual ports where some of these subs could be based. Well, this fractional orbital bombardment system, or FOBS, combined with hypersonic warheads, it's technology being combined that we don't have. And you're hearing him describe what it could do. And then he talks about North Korea having these two satellites circling over the United States. And the EMP Commission believes, and Dr. Price said many times, it's better than a 50% chance that one or both of those satellites have a nuclear device that could be used for EMP. And then you could use some of this technology to take out our actual satellites again that we need for conducting kinetic wars, where you actually blow things up, where you bomb things. You need these satellites to help with many things that are going on, just like you need your phone and your Maps Quest to take a trip or go somewhere in town that you don't know where you're going. You put it in your phone, right? Well, we have certain technologies that we need, that we've gotten used to, right? But our military has certain technologies that they need to win a war, a kinetic war, and to know what to bomb, where to bomb. All kinds of things going on that require these satellites to be used. Stuff that you and I, as lay people, unless you're watching and you've been in that industry, and we have a literal rocket scientist that was on with us the other night, whose area of expertise was putting up these satellites for the Navy, for the government, for the intelligence arena, for a specific agency. He was a Navy man, but he actually worked for a certain government agency that put up satellites that are used for national security. These satellites are crucial to fighting a kinetic war, a war of bombs, versus the new way of warfare like EMP or cyber hacking. North Korea has 2 satellites circling the globe. And the EMP Commission says one or both likely have a nuclear weapon aboard. Well, again, read about the fractional orbital bombardment system. The Soviet Union first, as he said, developed this idea in the 60s, like a kinetic bombardment system, but with nuclear weapons. FOBS had several attractive qualities. It had no range limit. No range limit. Its flight path would not reveal the target location. Like when a rocket takes off, right? When a rocket takes off and they see the trajectory, well, our computer systems can do the math very quickly and know exactly where that's going. Our computer systems, humans don't have to do it. Our computer systems could watch that and know this is where it's going to end up. But with a FOB system, fractional orbital bombardment system, you wouldn't be able to reveal its final target location. And the warheads could be directed toward North America over the South Pole, just as Dr. Pry was talking, which of course evades NORAD's north-facing early warning systems. Just look that up on Wikipedia. Read about that. And you'll find more about that in other places if you don't like Wikipedia. Why am I doing this tonight? I'm trying to show you that we are at a more dangerous time than we were even with the Cuban Missile Crisis, of which I wasn't born then. And last night, did you hear that in the State of the Union from Joe Biden? The Americans need to be preparing for war, that China is preparing for war. China is preparing their civilians for war. And folks, China this week showed us they're doing the things that you would do if war were imminent. They're taking the bold and decisive actions that one would do with war being imminent. And many already believe we are at war. We're certainly in the new way of warfare. And again, the government's not going to come help you. The government largely hates you, despises you, wants you locked up, imprisoned, and dead. I'm sorry to tell you that. Your government does not respect you or even like you, this audience. They think you're a domestic terrorist. They are not coming to help you. And they don't care about the American people or America or the rule of law or the Judeo-Christian worldview that has made America great. They despise us, and many of our people in government, including the White House occupant, are working for the other team. And I'm telling you tonight, we have been betrayed. We have been penetrated. Our government has been captured. They are pushing us to war. They are depleting our weaponry, so we are going to be sitting ducks for China. We can do nothing because we've been distracted by this mess in Ukraine with Russia that's been going on for how many years. And now where we have very little, if any, national security interest there, we're depleting our important armaments, ammunition, And we're not ready for what China could bring to us. We are being set up by the occupant of the White House, who is a traitor and I believe is on the take for the CCP. Let's go to another clip by Dr. Pry. This is from his TV show that I produced. This I released in May of 2022. May of 2022. I believe this is Dr. Pry's TV show. Maybe it's just an interview I did with him. We'll find out when it plays. If it's him sitting at this desk, it's his TV show we produced. But this was from May of 2022. That's at least when we published it. Listen to this.
And then there's a middle ground, okay? One that I have often been reminding people. You know, the Russians have this revolutionary new way of warfare, as do the Chinese and North Koreans, that's focused on attacking electric grids, national electric grids, and life-sustaining critical infrastructures with EMP and cyber warfare. You know, that would only entail the use of a single nuclear weapon detonated at high altitude. They consider that not nuclear war. It's considered a dimension of cyber warfare. And it's considered, even by many in the West, a form of gray zone aggression. You know, that it's not really crossing the line into a nuclear war, because you're not blowing up cities and burning down cities, and you're not killing millions of people immediately. You're just, quote unquote, destroying the electric grids and stopping the water and stopping transportation grids and destroying the food infrastructure. And it puts pressure on a president because it starts the clock ticking toward the death of millions. You know, the 90% of the American people would probably die, according to the EMP Commission estimates, if we had a nationwide blackout that lasted a year. A president, if he's rational, would try to avoid that by forgetting about Ukraine and forgetting about China and forgetting about Taiwan and forgetting about North Korea and taking all the surviving resources the United States has to restoring the electric grid and the other life-sustaining critical infrastructures, because under the Constitution, by common sense, that's what he should be doing. He should be saving the lives of Americans. That's why we have a U.S. government. It's supposed to protect their lives and property and their economy and all the things that they need in order to live and then recover from such a disaster. So, and that's part of the calculation that the bad guys have. You know, they know, and they would be counting on that. So these are the ranges of scenarios, and at least in my professional lifetime, I don't think we've ever been closer to the actual use of nuclear weapons. But I think Putin, the Russians, would try an EMP cyber war before they would actually go to the kind of classical nuclear warfare that we were thinking about during the Cold War, where you actually use tactical nuclear weapons or strategic weapons to use thermal and blast effects, you know, to destroy military targets, because they have invented this gray, what we call gray zone aggression, this alternative pathway where you might be able to win, and it would paralyze our retaliatory capabilities, by the way. You know, 99% of the electricity that goes to our military bases comes from the civilian grid.
Oh. Did you guys just hear that? Did you guys just hear that? What percentage was it? What percentage? Let me just back it up just a tad. Listen to that again.
That goes to our military bases comes from the civilian, and it would paralyze our retaliatory capabilities, by the way. You know, 99% of the electricity that goes to our military bases comes from the civilian grid.
Oh, yeah.
And if they're using super EMP weapons, the field strengths exceed the hardness of our command and control systems, the hardness of our satellites.
Okay, now listen, because for those of you saying, or maybe your friends would say, oh, no, our government has prepared for that. They've hardened all that. So Dr. Pry, you know, or whatever Brannon was reporting of Dr. No, they've hardened all that. Really? How much have they hardened it? To what level have they hardened it? You see, he's about to explain. They know to what degree we've hardened it, and they know what they need to overcome that. Listen to this.
The hardness of the electronics that are necessary to fly our bombers and to make our missiles operate. So it gives them that option, too, of not counting on the United States. If you're going to use tactical nuclear weapons, you're going to have to count on the fear in the West to make us refrain from retaliation. But if you do it this way, you don't immediately kill a lot of people, but you take away our retaliatory capabilities, and you start the clock ticking toward the mass destruction of America and of NATO, before they invaded Ukraine. I warned that one thing the Russians could do, especially if they got in trouble, was do an EMP attack on European NATO. And that would shut down one weapon detonated over Brussels, the NATO headquarters at Brussels, at an altitude of 70 kilometers, would black out the electric grids from Ireland to Poland. And that would isolate Ukraine from any help get it from the West. That would just entail, that's a scenario that people aren't thinking about in Washington, or at least not most of them. They're so focused on tactical nuclear weapons and these unrealistic, dangerous ideas that we can use Herman Kahn, who's no longer with us and who wrote back in 1960 that we can use that to justify, well, let's get more weapons. Let's get even deeper into the Ukraine war, and we'll just try to carefully calibrate what we're doing to make sure it doesn't turn into a nuclear war or into an EMP cyber war. And that really is overstating the wisdom and intelligence of the people in Washington. I don't trust our intelligence community. I don't trust our Department of Defense, especially under this. I don't trust the political leaders we've got in Washington right now on either side of the political aisle to have the intelligence and wisdom to be able to play that game. It's too dangerous a game. And we can't afford to get in a conflict with Russia because they would win a nuclear conflict. All their stuff is modern. They have far more warheads than we do. They have technological advantages over us. What we need is a long period of peace so that we can rebuild our nuclear and military strength, and especially get new political and military leadership at the helm of the West. People that aren't going to fail catastrophically. How anyone in Washington can trust that this administration and that this Pentagon would be able to defeat Russia when we couldn't even defeat the Taliban in Afghanistan a year ago.
Wow.
Is just beyond my understanding.
Wow. Well, Dr. Pry, it was a fast 15 minutes. All right, I'm going to stop it there. Couldn't defeat the Taliban in Afghanistan, but we're going to defeat Russia. And you say, well, Russia is so powerful. Why have they been bogged down so much in the Ukraine? Well, has he used EMP over Brussels? Has he used tactical nukes in the field? Maybe the goal is he doesn't really care about how many soldiers he loses. He's interested in dragging this out. He's interested in dragging this out, perhaps. Maybe that's what this is, a long game that he, Putin, and China are playing to drag this out and have America sending so much of our ammunition, munitions, war machines, javelins, different things, tanks, jets. And Ukraine's pretty certain they're going to get the jets. Draw this out and get America to send all this over there and deplete their stockpile so that when China starts doing their thing and moves in on Taiwan, America's depleted so much of what they needed. Is this the long game of China and Russia? Dr. Peter Vincent Pry. Let me go to another one of Dr. Pry. If I've played this one already, I'll stop it. Let's pick it up and try it out right here. This would have been from October 2020. I may have already played this. Let's hear it.
Now going to China. So, in effect, what China demonstrated is that it now has a fractional orbital bombardment system. But it has something that nobody else has demonstrated because it had a hypersonic warhead delivered by that fractional orbital bombardment system. And I don't really buy. I wonder why. It hasn't been explained in the press. And I don't know if this is the Pentagon's opinion or if they're relying on what the Chinese said in, when they advertised, this event, why they're saying it missed its target by, a couple dozen miles. How do we know that? Why do they say it missed its target? One of the most obvious missions for a fractional orbital bombardment system is an EMP attack. And 24 miles is nothing when you're doing an EMP attack. The radius of the EMP is hundreds of kilometers, hundreds of miles. And so you really can't miss. A single weapon is going to do something like create an EMP field that would cover all of North America. And that's probably the most logical. It's the most effective and most decisive kind of a weapon. That there are other things you can do with a fractional orbital bombardment system. But the first thing I think any military planner would probably want to do is use it for EMP, because that's the most decisive, the most effective way of using a fractional orbital bombardment system. Why would you add to a FOBS, though, a hypersonic warhead? There's a good reason for doing that when it comes to the EMP issue. Because if you're just using the fractional orbital bombardment system, just the FOBS, the weapon is going to be up there around 300 kilometers. That's enough to put an EMP field all over all of North America. And that would, take out electric grids, communication systems, all the unhardened civilian stuff. But the ICBM fields, the bomber bases, the ballistic missile submarine ports, we have tried to harden our military forces again.
Okay, now listen, here's where he gets where we have tried to harden them. Okay, we've tried to harden them, and he's going to show you how our enemies, in this example, China, with these fractional orbital bombardment systems combined with super or hypersonic warheads, could get around the level of hardening that we have done. Pay close attention.
Against EMP, they're hardened. The nuclear stuff, the command and control assets for the nuclear deterrent, are hardened to 50,000 volts per meter. That's pretty hard. So if you wanted to attack the ICBM fields, you'd want to put the peak EMP field down on them. The center of the EMP event, is where the EMP is strongest. And so what you might want to do is have the FOBS deliver a hypersonic warhead, a glide vehicle with a nuclear weapon in it. And by the way, the glide vehicle has been described as being designed to carry a nuclear weapon. And then you'd have that thing go down from 300 kilometers altitude to say about 70 to 30 kilometers, and find itself over, a missile field or over a bomber base, and then detonate. And that would put a peak field, and it put the strongest EMP field right over the asset that you're trying to attack. And there's only about 3 ICBM fields, 3 bomber bases, and the 2 ballistic missile submarine ports, and then a handful of, command and control assets like NORAD headquarters, and then, of course, Washington, D.C. So fewer than, maybe 10 or 12 targets, with a very powerful missile like the Satan II or a very powerful space launch vehicle. You could have a single missile deliver, a dozen of these glide vehicles. And
wait a minute, let me stop right there. So one single missile, one.
I want to stop right there though. But did you guys catch what he said? If you had it, what did he say that a lot of these are hardened to 50,000 volts per meter, whatever it was? But if you had this glide path and this FOB, get down there as close as possible, 70, whatever the figure he used, 6, whatever it was, the figure he used. Get down as close as you could, then let it detonate. You would be increasing the impact, and therefore your hardening to the degree it is now would be surpassed. But then I think you're about to hear him say, then you don't even have to talk about an EMP. If you could have a Satan II deliver multiple warheads that are on artificial intelligence, that are programmed for where to go, you wouldn't even need a nuclear weapon on them. You could go flat out kinetic without the nuclear part and damage them right in their silos. The Satan II. Listen to what he's saying here.
One rocket launch could contain enough of those individual, what you call them, gliders, to do this.
Yeah, hypersonic warheads, hypersonic glide vehicles.
Wow.
It depends upon the kind of missile you're using. If you've got a Satan II or if you've got a Proton space launch vehicle, the Chinese have been sending things, to the moon and beyond. So they've got a pretty advanced space program. So they've got heavy lift boosters that could be used to deliver. Now they use a Long March space launch vehicle, Long March 3 space launch vehicle, to deliver this single, glide vehicle. But they have more powerful rockets than that. And if they wanted to get more sophisticated, they could just put multiple weapons, on a single fractional orbital bombardment system, and get them up. The FOBs would get them over North America, and then these things would detach and glide down. They might even be powered, with small engines, so that they could put the peak fields right over the dozen missile bases, bomber bases, ballistic missile submarine bases, key command and control nodes. And in fact, I've actually described this method of attack, this kind of an attack. The EMP Commission described this in a report. I've described it in a report I wrote for the EMP Commission. I've described it in reports that I wrote independently of the EMP Commission.
Do you have one of your books that we can promote where they can go and get it that would have this? What book would that be? One of your books, like Blackout Wars, or what?
Yeah, I'd say The Power and the Light.
Okay, that's his latest book. Let me plug that for you, because you're always too humble to plug your own stuff. But let me plug his latest book, The Power and the Light, because he's saying that what China has just done, he actually was warning about that in his book that came. When did that book come out, Dr. Pry? Like a year ago?
The Power and the Light was published in 2020. But
2020.
Before that, the EMP Commission in 2017 published my report, Nuclear EMP Attack Scenarios and Combined Armed Cyber Warfare. And that has got exactly this kind of scenario right in it. That was back in 2017, and that's available. People can actually Google that. It's free. It's available on the EMP Commission website, www.firstempcommission.org.
And also
www.firstempcommission.org.
But I also want to plug them to get your book, The Power and the Light. Just go to Amazon, type in The Power and the Light by Peter Vincent Pry. Dr. Peter Vincent Pry, The Power and the Light, has a lot of this in there as well. We've got about 2 minutes left before my time slot's over. Dr. Pry, this report at Breitbart says the U.S. Army is scheduled to begin deploying a long-range hypersonic missile in late 2023. Do you think that'll really happen under this Biden administration?
Well, it probably will. I mean, unfortunately, none of our hypersonic vehicles are designed to carry nuclear weapons.
Oh, wow.
It's our hypersonic, so that doesn't cross the anti-nuclear bias of the Biden administration. They're willing to. On the other hand, it might be stopped. A lot of what we're doing might be stopped because when Biden was in Geneva last June and had the summit with Putin, it didn't get a lot of coverage, but they're going to be holding. He walked right into a trap that Putin set for him, an arms control trap, and the Russians and the Biden administration are having what are called strategic stability talks about new arms control agreements. Now, the Russians have violated all the arms control agreements they've signed with us, yet the Biden administration is going ahead and wants to deal with the Russian threat, not by building up U.S. nuclear strength, not by building up, new high-tech systems the way the Chinese and the Russians are doing, but through arms control. And one of the things that has been suggested by Biden's political base, the anti-nuclear activists, for example, from the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists and the rest, one of the things they're recommending is bringing back the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty, the INF Treaty, which the Russians are already cheating on. But if we do that, if we reinstate the INF Treaty, it'll stop the Army's planned hypersonic missiles, because those are intermediate range missiles. The hypersonic programs that we have are for the intermediate range missiles.
Wow.
And Wendy Sherman, who is the person leading the charge for the Biden administration, is just the person to do it.
Wow.
She's one of the most grossly incompetent people in the State Department. She gave us the agreed framework that enabled North Korea to become a nuclear weapon state. She led, under the Obama administration, she led the negotiating team for the Iran nuclear deal. I'm sure you've talked a lot about that on your show.
Yes.
One of the worst, Iran's, if not, Iran isn't already a nuclear weapon state. I think it is already, but it's on the threshold of becoming one. And now she's been entrusted to negotiate with the Russians on a whole range of arms control issues. And one of the things she's being pushed to do is to sign us up again for the INF Treaty, which the Russians are cheating on. All right, but we would stop, the practical effect of that would be to stop our hypersonic weapon program and our intermediate range missile program. Another thing they want to do is have a freeze on U.S. ballistic missile defense and a prohibition on U.S. space-based defenses. That's one of the things the Russians would like. Something Wendy Sherman is likely to give them. Silo-based ICBMs. They want to. Another thing that's being talked about is banning silo-based ICBMs, which amounts to banning U.S. ICBMs, because all of our ICBMs are based in silos.
Right.
Russia, China, North Korea have missiles, ICBMs that are mobile, and they wouldn't be touched by a silo-based ban. And the Russians could do something clever, like say, okay, we're going to get rid of 40 Satan-1s that carry 400 warheads, and you have 400 ICBMs. So you give up all of your ICBMs, the 400 ICBMs, and we'll get rid of 40 Satan-1s. They're planning to replace the Satan-1 with the Satan-2 anyway. So in effect, they would give up nothing, but we would give up all our ICBMs.
Wow.
And so these are some of the arms control nightmares that can come out of these so-called strategic stability talks that will actually, if any of these ideas are implemented, they could be the nail in our coffin. They are highly destabilizing agreements that would put Russia or China or even North Korea in a position to win a nuclear World War III against us. We have signed on to so many of these arms control treaties that have been violated by Russia and China. We cannot afford one more big treaty that is a screw-up.
We can't afford one more. Well, there you go, my friends. This is how dangerous this is. Absolutely. Again, I wish Dr. Pry were here. We'd have an awful lot to talk about. Now, this is a little bit of his TV show before I go on to how to survive a nuclear strike. Because, again, EMP would be the first way, the new way of warfare, cyber hacking, EMP. But what if there were an actual nuclear situation or a dirty bomb? This is from Dr. Pry, posted October 2020. This is his actual TV show that I produced, and he was sitting at this desk where I'm sitting right now, Dr. Peter Vincent Pry. This is, again, warning about how America must respond to the military threat from Russia. And do you think that's happening under Biden? No. Did we hear anything about war last night, preparing for war, getting us on a war footing? No. But we did have a 4-star general come out and tell his people, you better prepare for war. We'll be at war with China within the next, 2 years. By 2025, if not sooner. Here's Dr. Pry.
Among these unprecedented Russian nuclear threats are the Sarmat, a new heavy ICBM that NATO designates as the Satan II, that will have an even heavier throw weight than the SS-18 Mod 1, that's called Satan 1. The SS-18 Satan 1 carries 10 warheads that have yield accuracy combinations so that one of these missiles would be able to destroy 10 U.S. ICBM silos. The new heavy ICBM that they're planning to replace it, and it may begin deploying as early as this year or next year, can carry at least 15 warheads and possibly as many as 40. Another super weapon they have is the avant-garde, which is a hypersonic reentry vehicle that can be carried by any of their ICBMs. A large number of them could be carried by the Sarmat, or the Satan II, and it will be maneuverable so it can penetrate our national missile defenses, although it doesn't need that maneuverability, because our national missile defenses were never designed with the sophistication to intercept Russian weapons anyway. But in their paranoia, they've designed it to penetrate our national missile defense, or perhaps that's just disinformation, because they want to mislead us about why it has that maneuverability. You're always saying, well, the avant-garde has maneuverability to get through our missile shield. But in reality, this also gives it unprecedented accuracy, making it one of the most effective first strike weapons they've ever had, because the ability to have a maneuvering warhead not only enables you to penetrate our national missile defenses as they currently exist, but it would enable you to have extraordinarily precise accuracy against our hard targets like our missile silos. An avant-garde maneuvering warhead, might be able to strike the silo right on its lid, or get so close to the silo that you don't even need a nuclear weapon in order to destroy it. It could do it perhaps with a kinetic kill, or with a very low yield clean warhead, so that it would limit the amount of fallout and radioactive fallout that would come, and limit the damage to our civilian population. So you could have a very clean surgical nuclear first strike and win a nuclear war with very little risk of U.S. retaliation against their cities, because we would have the damage to our own population would be negligible. That could be the purpose of the avant-garde. Another one of these super weapons, is the Kinjal, which is a nuclear-powered cruise missile that would be also designed to penetrate our defenses, but has a dwell time so that it could fly for a very protracted period and find ways to penetrate our airspace that we wouldn't know about, evading our radars and our interceptors, interceptor aircraft, as well as missiles. See, the President Trump, much to his credit, is already responding to some of these threats. And, we know he is in the process of modernizing our strategic forces. He has also signed an executive order on March 26th to protect our nation from one of the worst threats posed by Russia, which is EMP attack.
So isn't that interesting? We had a commander-in-chief that was actually working to protect and defend America. And folks, the globalists, the deep staters, who apparently are working for the other side, had to get rid of him. They had to get rid of him. Now, let's go quickly to what made a lot of news in the last few months. A lot of news in the last few months, and that is the Poseidon, the artificial intelligence unmanned sub that could carry a massive nuclear weapon and create a nuclear tsunami, but also be used to create such a massive EMP field in the ocean that since they can't find our nuclear subs, they could use the Poseidon and let off such a massive nuclear weapon with this unmanned artificial intelligence sub that the EMP field would be so great it would damage our subs, who then could not get the signals to release their missiles. Listen to this. Dr. Pry, he wrote a whole book on this a few years ago.
Issue today's topic will be Russia's 100 megaton monster bomb. It might actually be a 200 megaton monster bomb. A new weapon system called Poseidon. The Russians called Poseidon. It's a super weapon that was announced by Russian President Vladimir Putin last spring, where he confirmed that they're developing and already experimenting with a robot submarine. It's an unmanned submarine or self-propelled torpedo that's artificially intelligent. And it's designed to carry a massively powerful nuclear warhead. Most Russian press describes it as being 100 megatons. And the purpose of this weapon, according to Putin, was several-fold. That it would be designed to create radioactive tidal waves to flood the eastern and western seaboard, where most of our population lives, and flood them, eliminate the coastal cities with a huge tidal wave that could be raised to 300 meters high. That's 300 feet by means of a 100 megaton bomb detonated off the coasts of the United States, East Coast, West Coast, Gulf Coast, and that would flood out cities and towns and cause radioactivity so that these places would become uninhabitable. They've also described them as being for taking out aircraft carrier groups, because the underwater shock wave and tidal wave from a monster bomb like this could destroy our aircraft carriers. The mission I think is most likely for these is to take out our ballistic missile submarines. They are the last survivable leg of the triad. They can destroy our bombers, they can destroy our ICBMs with the weapons that they've got now, but our submarines have always been the thing they haven't been able to get at. They've been successful at hiding in the ocean, undetected by the Russians. But with an artificially intelligent robot submarine, they may well be able to track our ballistic missile submarines and tail them with these Poseidons. The shock wave from a 100 megaton bomb would be over 100 kilometers, so they wouldn't even have to be close, so that at a signal, when they're ready, they could take out our ballistic missile submarines. Let's talk in more detail about this new doomsday weapon, because that's what it is, and that's how the Russians have basically described it too. Doomsday has a name. Moscow christens their newest nuclear apocalypse machine Poseidon, after the Greek god of oceans, earthquakes, and tsunamis. Poseidon will be deployed between 2018 and 2027.
And it's already been deployed, and they've already made a big deal. They've deployed it, and the submarine that's carrying it, they've let us know.
According to TASS, the program was secret until 2016. Well, TASS turned out to be wrong about 2018, and they are on the verge of deploying it, according to Russian press, and we can see that they are practicing with an experimental model. They've talked about deploying this year, eventually, about 32 of these. In 2016, Russian state television accidentally, put quotes around that, accidentally revealed plans for an unmanned robot submarine, like a huge intelligent torpedo armed with a massive 100 megaton warhead, the largest nuclear weapon ever deployed by any nation. Poseidon would explode underwater to radioactively contaminate and inundate with tsunamis U.S. coastal cities and seaboard, where are concentrated much of America's military, industrial strength, and population. U.S. intelligence confirms the existence of Poseidon in the 2018 Nuclear Posture Review. Russia is testing a prototype now. Russian press reports the power of the robot submarine will be 100 megatons, equivalent to 100 million tons of TNT, according to former senior Defense Department official Mark Schneider, one of Washington's best informed analysts. There have been other Russian press reports that give the yield as high as 200 megatons. A single press report has given the yield as 2 megatons, which is still powerful, but that's more of a run-of-the-mill, more powerful than your average Russian nuclear weapon, but 200 megatons is obviously not nearly as powerful as 100 megatons. So what to make of these various estimates on the yield? Several sources say 100 megatons to 200 megatons. One source has said 2 megatons. Well, it's possible that this advanced nuclear weapon has a dial yield, so that they can adjust the yield to whatever the target is. Maybe the 2 megatons would be for going after aircraft carrier groups, whereas the 100 to 200 megatons would be for the doomsday mission that would entail using one of these monster bombs to make enormous tidal waves against the U.S. coastal regions and irradiate them with radioactive tidal waves. Now, Interfax reports, quote, on March 1, the Russian president spoke about the creation in Russia of unmanned underwater machines capable of moving at a very low depth, that is a very deep depth, and an intercontinental range at a speed far exceeding the speed of submarines. That's about 100 kilometers per hour, which is a very high speed, faster than any of our subs can travel for the Poseidon. The most modern torpedoes and all types of surface ships, even the most high-speed ones, wouldn't be able to catch Poseidon, Putin said. And Poseidon carries a quote-unquote massive nuclear ordnance, according to Russian President Vladimir Putin, a massive nuclear ordnance. That phrase isn't consistent with the lower estimated yield of 2 megatons. That's a lot more consistent with 100 to 200 megatons. Because 2 megatons, as I said, that's on the higher end of the yield side for a Russian megaton. But 1 to 2 megatons is kind of a run-of-the-mill nuclear weapon for the Russians. That's not, in their book, a massive nuclear ordnance. But 100 to 200 megatons is. And that is the yield that's most often cited in the Russian reporting on Poseidon.
All right, we're going to hold it there. Now, since that was recorded and that was done right here in our studio, and we've spent a lot of time post-editing that show, putting those graphics together, trying to make it as professional and compelling as possible because it deserves that kind of professionalism for the content. Yeah, so a lot of work went into that, folks.